Welcome back to Divine Messy Human. I have the wonderful Rachel Gallen back with us today because there's another thing that keeps coming up in healing sessions, and I thought, who better to get it from than the woman who taught it to me? So, thank you so much for coming back, Rach.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I am delighted to be here, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I know last time we were talking about that 4 stages of womanhood, and for me, especially, that's come up a lot again this weekend, having been at Seven Sisters Festival and an interesting time, but seeing all of those women who, again, are, in all of those various stages of womanhood and having to explain to a couple of them that Marga stage was actually really enlightening for them and super helpful. So, yeah, so thank
Oh,
you for
that's
sharing that with
wonderful.
us.
That's great. It's so lovely to know that more and more people are coming to an understanding of what the stage actually is.
Absolutely. And I think it gives us that bit more clarity and direction because I know myself when somebody said I was heading into crone phase, I could feel that little bit of, oh, I don't know that I'm ready for that yet.
Mm,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
it's not quite there.
No, no, I'd say not. And I have a few years on you, and I
Yeah.
definitely don't feel I'm there either. So,
No. So
but
Marga feels much
mm,
more. Yeah, I can go into that one a bit early. I don't mind
yeah,
that one. So today I wanted to talk about, I remember years ago, goodness, and I think I had to remind you about it, that there was this little story that you told about will and all the different parts, and it came up in another healing, well, it comes up regularly, but one that really, I guess, triggered my mind to go, I really want to talk about that again. Probably only a couple of months ago now. And so I wanted you to, I guess, just chat through those different parts of ourselves and how they interact with one another. And I'll jump in with some questions when I have some.
great, great. It's such a wonderful, I call it a technique just in this
Mm,
moment. It's called almost be a modality of its own.
yep.
So the lovely person that taught it to me um, has, and she's gone through various variations of it herself,
Mm,
in fact. So, but the essence of it is that when we talk about true self,
mm,
it's the having the understanding that we have these we are made up of different parts, and so in order for us to be operating from that true self, or even a different way of, sometimes better, not always, way of saying it is our true intelligence.
mm,
So we're very familiar, as you would be, with lots of buzzwords around emotional intelligence, for
mm,
instance. And when I have delved into that over the years, I've thought, I just think that this is quite interesting. I feel as if it's not quite how I would portray um, the emotional intelligence
mm,
in the way that I would, when I look at it from this true self point of view, because it talks a lot about emotional intelligence uh, going along with the mental mind. And I think, oh,
yes.
I'd like to see those as when I say separate, obviously
Mm,
this is the whole, but we're trying to identify that within the whole there are these different aspects.
mm,
So, so Will is a great character because, and we seem to refer to him as he. We don't have to, but
well,
for
there's that more
the
masculine. So
yeah,
I always say
yeah,
in these conversations, we're talking much more archetypally than gender
yeah.
based. It's not about
That's
the
true.
gender.
Absolutely.
And so it
And
is a much more masculine character.
it is. And I think because of the word will, which
Mm,
can also be shortened from a boy's name,
mm,
like there's something that
yes.
leads into it from there too. Um, so our sense of self that we sometimes talk about, or our center, or our the light within us, or where our courage comes from, all of these sorts of areas, very in if we were talking in the slightly westernized chakra aspects, we would be thinking about solar plexus.
Hmm.
So it's about the truth of the of who I am. when I think about it, I think also of an unadulterated version of ourselves. So when we came into this world, when we were birthed, born in, and literally arrived as a babe, then we come in unadulterated. We don't intellectually know anything. We don't emotionally know. Obviously there are things that we know on some level, but we're not yet affected by the outside world. And so then when you look at it from that point of view, will is almost like the switchboard I was thinking earlier, like he's got to have all the plugs in the right places to make all those other connections. But without will, there is a sense of, well, something's missing, because when we come in, a belief that many of us share, and not everybody does, and that's obviously, this is just an opinion, that we come in with lessons to learn, with experiences to have, and then a way of talking about that is to say remembering. So we're remembering who we are, the truth of who we are, without all of the who should I be, or who does that person want me to be. As we grow up, we go, once we start to learn from our environment, long before we get as far as kinder or school, for instance. But we're picking up signs, aren't we? And learn behaviors and all that kind of thing. So the remembering is, this central switchboard that maybe will, I'm not going to use, I don't want to use the word control, but maybe Will has a bit more of an understanding of how it works. He's got a bit of an instruction manual, which is a little bit like Will himself. Even Will having what's it called? Like I've lost the word, but where you've got a list of things, you're going to tick them off. So that's will, really. And so then through will, you have this sense of courage to be who I am, and courage to stand by all these experiences that I'm creating. So it's very easy when stuff happens for us, isn't it, to say, well, it's nothing to do with me. But there's always an opportunity to say, what could I learn from that experience? And so the idea that there's a will with a checklist, then it's really like, oh yeah, I think that was one of the things. Oh, I think I've done that before. If I go back a few pages on my checklist, I'll see that I've had that experience before. This time, I'm going to respond a bit differently. So then it's really using the intelligence of the operator, if you like. Does
Beautiful.
that puts it into quite a nice context, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I know the last time we were getting, Will to actually do the directing and the being allowed to play that masculine role and doing we're going into choice here, and it makes so much sense to think of him as that, the operator with the checklist, and understanding how to use that switchboard of choice and sense of self. It really, really does. Yeah,
it really does, because then when in the remembering, and I've mentioned about the word, used the word whole before. So will is just one aspect, but as part of that whole, then it's not, there needs to be an element of, I think you said the right word then, directing. Because if you think about a a corporation or a business of any size, really, but we tend to think about more with larger businesses, then they would have a board, and so there would be regular board meetings or management, even management. It doesn't have to be a board, but it would be a management team. And each person on that board or on that management team has got a specific skill.
Yes.
And so one way of, when we talk about it like this, is to think, well, if you had one of these major corporations and they wanted to put a new marketing strategy out, for instance, they would not have a meeting without the marketing manager, the marketing director, being present at that meeting, contributing the strategy in whatever way, shape, or form. It would sound crazy, counterintuitive to do that. Now, if it was that the production manager wasn't present at the meeting, maybe that could be okay, but not, in that respect. So if we then put this into the context of our true self and our aspects of self, then that's our inner management team, our inner board. So some people I've taught this to over the years think of it as it's the boardroom meeting, and they don't make any decisions around what they might be doing in their business life or personal life, even without checking in with their little boardroom table. Now, depending on who you're working with, and I'm sure you've done this for yourself as well, in some contexts, within a session, within a therapy session, you might talk about, well, this person is work related, so we'll talk about the management team or the board. If it's more personal, you might say, or it could be of a more sensitive nature, you might say, well, rather than having a boardroom table, let's make a campfire. Or let's bring some cushions into a circle on the beach and have some beautiful shells. You can make this look however you want it to look. But essentially what we do is we invite all of the different aspects to the table, into the circle, to the team. And so if in this moment, because we've talked a bit more about will than we've introduced the others, then let's invite will. The will within anybody, who is listening to this right now, sensing that sense of self within them, the courage to be who they are, the kind of unadulterated version, because we each have that within us, to then invite the other aspects so that then we can see the team build. Should we do that? Yeah. So I'm going to go a little intuitively in terms of who Will would like to invite in next. And what I'm getting is that Will would like to invite in the emotional self. So I mentioned before about emotional intelligence. And yes, absolutely, it is a great way of introducing our emotional self. It's very much the felt sense rather than the thought sense. So you will have done this, I'm sure, many times as well in your sessions, and asking somebody how they feel. And their response is, I think something. And I'll always say, that's really interesting, but I asked you how you felt about that and not thought about it. So in the sense of our feelings, being able to tap into them, it's not about judging them. They are what they are. It's often quite a visceral experience that we're having with our feelings. They can be of all sorts of different natures. But where the energy is within our emotional self, it's either flowing or it's not. So when our emotions get stuck, we might stuff them down, whatever it might be. But our emotional self is to me, it's a very beautiful part of our team, often overlooked by ourselves, as opposed to that no other people aren't seeing or recognizing our feelings. It's often that we're not doing that for ourselves. So with Will, connecting with our emotional self, then perhaps will can encourage us to say, well, as an emotional being, how do I experience the world? Do I feel into things? Do I walk into a room and feel, oh, this doesn't feel right? Or, do I walk past something and then stop and go, something's drawing me in there, whatever it might be. So will is wanting to encourage, and I've said it like that because of course will is the courage, but to encourage, to bring in, these other aspects, have the courage to go into that feeling. And with that slightly directorial, if that can be a word, sense, and a little bit more of the masculine, to really balance beautifully the emotional self, because maybe we have a bit of a perception that our emotions are the feminine, girly, type of, no, this is changing as the generations come through. But the idea of in this moment, Will saying, let's get the emotional self in first to the team, feels really rather lovely. There's something quite precious there. So then the will might say to the emotional self, well, who should we bring in next? And the emotional self now is saying, let's bring in the mental mind, because then we've got that thought, where our thoughts go, energy flows, we've got that lovely, how do you think? How do you feel? We've suddenly the picture that we might be looking at internally or externally, we feel we've got even more balance to. And it feels, I'm just looking at the microphone I have here that's sitting on a tripod, all of a sudden that
There's
feels quite lovely, doesn't it, as well, because it's not just mind and emotions. We've got this very grounding energy coming from will.
And it's interesting with that mental mind. It is so often we kind of bypass that emotional self to get into the mental mind, because we're taught we can think our way through life, and yet we really need to be feeling our way through and using that mental mind, because the mind only knows what it knows.
That's right. Absolutely. And so when we come back to and remind ourselves as well that will has come in a little bit knowing what there is that we're going to experience, because Will's got the checklist. So every so often we can remind ourselves of that. It's like, the times when we say, why on earth have I created this? The will is perhaps there to remind us, like, well, don't worry, it's on the checklist. Use all your tools, and you'll find your way. So now we've got this nice little trio there. Let's go into what I would, if I was doing this, and obviously not with a campfire necessarily, but in terms of the circle, that I would invite, well, let's go into the center of the circle where we find heart. And we find what I call essence, which we could think of a bit more as the sort of primary self, spirit, if you like, not so much soul. I feel, and you think you will agree, soul is a little bit, it's a different thing here. But the heart, which is about, yes, the loving self, but the desires of the heart. What is it that we are wanting to create? And the trust that we can bring those things in. So, the heart also, of course, the softness, an aspect of where there are some things to be thought through, worked through. Also tapping into what is it that the heart, so being led by head and heart. And in fact, the heart feeds our mind. I mean, without it, would there be a lot more sort of robotic?
The Heart Math Institute have proven that there's more neurons that fire from the heart to the brain than the brain to the heart.
They have, haven't they? Yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah. And so
yeah,
I find that so fascinating that
yeah.
it's so much more active and the electromagnetic field of it is so much bigger.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm,
Well, there's beautiful proof then, in terms of that being able to show the energy through
mm,
through that. That's fantastic.
mm,
So if we then have with the alongside the heart, the essence, the primary self, um, when we think of that, what we have come in for, if you like, the how we came in, and the standing by the creation of what we are creating, but also that we have been created in
mm.
terms of
Yep.
this, how we come
Yeah.
into being. um the what I was contemplating earlier with the essence was the enthusiasm, and again that ties in with
Mm,
will, because he's with his checklist and with the switchboard, in terms of, there's all these things, and yes, some of the stuff, some of the experiences that we create um, aren't always a bed of roses. But if
mm.
we when we're working from this place of true intelligence, then we can generally muster more enthusiasm to get to the other side, rather than giving up.
Mm.
And so the word enthusiasm comes, I gather, from Greek, and it means to be filled with the essence of the universe. So then, if we seeing ourselves as just the mic, and we'd mentioned this last time, the micro within the macro, the macro within the micro. So in terms of each person here working from the aspect, or from the true intelligence of who they are, then we are looking to be bringing more of that essence of the universe out through the experience of our own individual lives. Yeah, just one way of
And I
looking
love
at it.
working with that heart essence. I think it's just such a beautiful way to almost, often I think of it almost as that delivery vehicle of how I've gone through that emotional self and that mental self. Well, how am I delivering it out in the world?
Yeah,
And can I wrap it in that heart essence to do so?
yes, yes,
Mm,
because like you said earlier, this is about creating choice,
mm,
and saying, well, I can choose to do it this way. I can choose to, even though something might have been very difficult, very painful, whatever it means, if we put it through the heart and the essence together,
mm.
it partly softens it, but it also makes it more dimensional, doesn't it? So
Absolutely.
it changes that, the appearance of it, because currently what we're building, we can draw a circle onto a piece of paper, or into the
Mm,
sand on the beach, or whatever it might be, but essentially what we're describing here is multidimensional, because it's about being able to step into it, and be on one side, and all of these aspects can connect to each of the other. They
yeah.
can go through the center, they can go around the outside. So there's that, the planet as we know it, but we know that we're not just living around the surface.
Mm.
And of course, for several centuries now, we know that we're not just going to fall off either, all sorts of things like that.
And
So
I like
with
that idea of, if we can do things with slightly more enthusiasm, then, I mean, we know what it feels like when Will is overwhelmed by his checklist and he's stuck in that drudgery of work rather than the enthusiasm of it. And
Yes,
even just tapping into that small part of it, okay, so how can I bring more enthusiasm to this work that I'm doing, to these checklists, to these things I'm trying to achieve, all of a sudden that enjoyment factor shifts a bit.
It does. Yes, it does.
Mm.
And going back to the switchboard analogy, there's a sense as well of that the enthusiasm to make all of those connections. And when we're making the inner connections,
Mm.
in very simple terms, it means that life is flowing. So our thoughts are flowing, and so into action or whatever it might be. Our feelings are flowing. Will doesn't feel as though he's overwhelmed. Everything's in flow for him. The heart just, we're going through natural ups and downs maybe, but we're managing.
Yeah.
We're not being overcome or snowed under by too much feeling, too much of a busy mind, all of this. So it's all because it's coming through the filter, if you like, of the essence and the heart together. And then of course we have the beautiful vehicle of our physical body. And so without we're very aware of our physical bodies, and then we're not aware of them. Aren't we? There's
Yes, there is that duality.
Yeah. And yes, we can see our physical body as the vehicle to get us through, and we put food in to fuel us, and it's all about thinking and doing, and ticking I'd call it the outer things off the checklist, but not necessarily noticing, as I mentioned earlier, we might be doing the same thing, like a difficult thing over and over, until we stop and look within, go, okay, I need to find a different way of doing this through my growing intelligence, my growing remembering of who I am, because I want to show up in the best way that I'm able to, whatever that might mean in any particular moment. So the physical body, as we know, takes quite a bit of that stress and strain. Whether it's literally through overdoing things so that we're tired, whether it's that we're bringing our shoulders up and sort of holding on and not breathing deeply, and not bringing our shoulders back and opening our heart. So there's all of those sorts of things, as well as then whatever we might be experiencing physically or physiologically, through pain, through illness, whatever it might be. So the story that I always like to tell, very short little story about the physical body and the intelligence of it, is that all of us will have experienced at some point a simple cut or graze somewhere on our body. And if we notice it, we might tend to it by cleaning it up or sticking a band-aid over it, whatever it might be. Sometimes we graze ourselves or have a bruise, and we don't actually notice that it's there. And the most wonderful thing about our physical body's true intelligence is that for those sorts of things, it knows how to heal itself. We don't have to talk to it. We don't have to look at the lesion on our skin and use any of our other aspects in order to heal that, as long as we know we've taken due diligence and taken care of it. Obviously, the body can't do that to our understanding and knowing in this moment, at this time, of all different ailments. But it does have the most incredible intelligence. And I think to remind ourselves of that regularly is a great thing to do. And so that if we do something like the graze or the cut or the bruise or the bump or whatever, to actually talk to our body and say, my goodness me, I know just how amazing you are. And, if there's anything else that you need me to do apart from, wash this graze or whatever, then you sit in stillness and wait for an answer. So that's that's just being very simple, simplistic rather, about it. But I feel like we could do better the time,
Well, I think that I often go to thinking about that, to go a little bit more technical, the parasympathetic nervous system. It just digests your food. You just breathe. You don't have to think about those things. If you're hot, you just start to sweat. If you're
That's
nervous, you
right.
just start to sweat. Things just
Yes.
start to happen. And yes, sometimes things do get out of whack and we need to draw them back in and have a look at, what that might be. But the amount that our body does naturally is phenomenal. We don't have to tell our heart to beat or our lungs to
No,
beat.
you're absolutely right. No,
It's
and
so
they are,
incredible.
it is, and they're the bigger deals, aren't they, really, than my analogy of
But I love
the
the
graze
idea
and
of
the
it
bump and the
healing on its
bruise.
way
Yeah.
because I mean, having again just come back from Seven Sisters and done set up and pack down on my own, I do have a few bruises, and it was interesting. So I'm like, oh, I didn't even feel when I got that one,
Yes.
and yet I
Yeah.
thought I was doing it in presence. And I've got a
Sure.
number of bruises that I don't remember where I got them, how I got them, and you know how you get them in strange places when you've done things like that, and you're like, I thought I was doing this in awareness. So still there was a part of me who was not paying attention to
Yes.
that. It's really
Absolutely.
fascinating.
It is really fascinating, and of course the breathing and the heart beating, and the skin healing and all of those
Mm,
things. It is phenomenal, and perhaps something that everybody, and many of us rather,
mm,
could do is to have a real daily gratitude
mm,
for the intelligence of the physical body, for all of those things that we actually take for granted.
mm,
So with the physical body on board now, and I guess, we started with will, we brought in the emotional self, we then brought in the mental mind to have the thoughts with the feelings, and then we brought in the heart and the essence, and then we've brought in the physical body. That just leaves a little kind of duo of,
mm,
not just, but it leaves a little duo of the masculine and feminine essence.
mm.
Now, this can be interpreted in so many different ways. I feel as this could almost be a whole other podcast.
Mhm. Oh, yes.
This is an area that you're very, very practiced and skilled and learned. I'm going to use that word in terms of the divine feminine, divine masculine, and the recognition of what that means.
Mm,
And it's really relevant for us to keep learning and to keep
mm,
exploring what this means for each one of us. In this sense, just again, to not to belittle it in any way by keeping it simple, but what I would say in this moment is that it's like a couple. And
mm,
again, it doesn't need to be gender specific,
mm.
but there are traits, characteristics that the masculine aspect has, and there are traits and characteristics that the feminine has. And actually, within those, they have the other as well. We know
Mm.
this. So what we actually end up with, in a sense, is something that's very balanced and very harmonious.
Yeah.
And it's a very unified, it's a wonderful union. So I've done many, many meditations with clients and for myself, where I've envisaged that I
Mm,
have these little versions of, like a mini me of the
mm,
masculine and a mini me of the feminine. And it's a little bit like, to just coin a phrase, a marriage guidance counseling
mm,
session. And, it's like, well, how does that feel for you? And what did that sound like? And, then you pose the same question to the other party, and you have a
mm,
dialogue. Essentially, it's as well as the bigger union and remembering of the whole, it's for them to be in that real, and we again said it last time, the yin yang,
yeah.
the light and the dark,
Mm,
just operating in beautiful harmony together, so that what we're birthing in terms of our heart's desires, what we're bringing into being in terms of what we're creating through our, whether it's experiences that are welcomed or not, whether it's, you know, something that we're actively manifesting, no matter, the fact that we've got the masculine and the feminine aspects birthing together, you know, perfect harmony. It's the seed and the, you know, and the birth. It's all of the. We can make it very, very physical, almost biblical in a sense as well. But it's so often it only might be only a tiny amount. They're just not quite in sync. So in the sense of working with them as the round table or the boardroom meeting or the campfire, then that's how I would describe them. That's how I would sort of utilize them as in terms of what they bring.
And if you've got a bickering couple at the boardroom table, things don't tend to go so well.
No, they do not. No. And many people will have experienced that in the real world. And as you know, if we can, and you know, sometimes it's relevant to have the gender specifics in there.
Yeah.
Many times it isn't. And so, but you know, I love working with this in terms of taking somebody through a meditation as part of a session, or you know, in terms of an actual meditation group, because somebody, you'll get a chuckle, you know, and you'll say, oh, what did that? Well, you know, the masculines come in and it's like, you know, riding a motorbike and, you know, all the leathers on and the big black, you know, smoke glass helmet and all of this. Okay. And how's the feminine? Well, you know, she's just this tiny little thing. I mean, barely even a flower. And so for that person in that moment, they've got quite strong beliefs maybe around what the role of the masculine is, what the role of the feminine is. And by the time they've done this lovely dialogue and you've brought all of the other aspects in, who else would like to contribute to this conversation and that sort of thing? Like, what do they look like now? Well, you know, kind of like a pair of hippies on the grass at the, you know, for instance, Seven Sisters Festival, or no, it's just this beautiful couple walking along the beach and they're both wearing white and, you know, hand in hand. So people, obviously, I'm just making these things up, but they create their own images, but from something that's obviously been quite deep seated within them. So again, a nice way of bringing the bickering or the lack of understanding between them into the open, so that it can be.
Well, I remember the first time I did that process, and I had my feminine as this amazing Wonder Woman Amazonian goddess because I'd been working with her so much. And my masculine was like Danny DeVito is, the penguin, just short and angry because he'd been running the show for so long. And all of a sudden, I just worked on feminine embodiment. And it was like I'd turfed him out with the rubbish. And of course, when he's been running the show and all of a sudden he's effectively been fired from his job, he's like, you know, and learning then to work with both of them together so that they're both in communion with each other, so that they're both actually harmonizing and working together, has been a huge stage of my growth. I remember in that, I think we were doing a 4-hour session that day.
We did a special thing, I remember.
And then I was getting really angry at the yin yang sign because they'd merged so beautifully. I was like, but why does that have to be separate? But understanding that is such a beautiful pictorial representation of the fact that we need both masculine and feminine energies, and each has the other within it, and they all combine to make that whole. And it doesn't matter if your personal, you know, balance of that, you want to be 60% feminine, 40% masculine, or 75% masculine, 25%. It's finding that right balance for you that works for you in your life. And
Yes.
often what happens is by bringing in more of the feminine, as I say, I use that analogy of the riverbed. If you've got a riverbed that is directing your water flow, the water can rage at points. It can go into a little calm eddy. It can, just go along. But we all know what happens when there's no riverbed and the water it gets destructive. It gets damaging. And so we need a container for the feminine that directs the flow and that's how they work together. It's
Yes.
providing that structure and strength so that we are allowed to feel, so that we can balance out the other side of our nature. And having the two in balance, I can't even tell you how much it's changed my life. And obviously, we have
Absolutely.
to keep going back and redressing the balance, because once we've
Sure.
sorted something, it doesn't stay there.
Yes. And also, yeah, yes, as well as that though, isn't it, if we think about it as one is teaching the other new skills.
Mm,
So, we're seeing this very much in our universe, if you like, right now, in terms of equality through,
mm,
in work and all sorts of things. Don't need to stray into that area, but it's being able to say to the other, could I suggest we tried doing it this way, and like, oh my goodness, I'd never thought of doing it like that.
mm,
And you combine the skills then, so there's this lovely thing where everybody's benefiting, because there's real, union, communion, community, collaboration. That's what this is all about. And the more we are doing that in the outer world, based on what we're doing in our inner world, the more
mm.
we'll see change.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
and so
And
being
not one
able,
part's getting tired because it's
no,
trying to do all of the work and it's the one that's doing everything. And
yes,
so we're able to bring that um, energy and enthusiasm back in more because we're not
yes,
exhausting ourselves.
no, that's right. Because occasionally, the masculine might, bit like your Danny DeVito character, might be really tired.
Mm,
And so the feminine might come in and say, well, I'll tell you what, you have been working really hard. Why don't you
mm,
take a rest? Let me do this.
mm,
And so those typical roles don't
mm,
need to possibly even exist. But
mm,
we can have boundaries, but they can be fluid. As you're describing with the water, occasionally it bend, the river bend, it changes, you
mm.
suddenly you end up with a bit of a beach because of the way that the river has flown around. And then other times you've got this rough stone, and the
Mm.
river's worn it away, and so it's become smooth. So there's extraordinary things that are happening. I
Mm.
wanted to read this. This is from an essence that I have, but it just sums it up really beautifully, I think. If I can just find it. The inner union of wisdom, feminine, with the skillful action of the masculine. So that's equilibrium. It's from an essence called Spiritual Marriage.
Mm.
That's from Findhorn in Scotland, one of their essences. And so but just to say it again, the inner union of wisdom with the skillful action, feminine, masculine.
Mm.
And then why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want to have the beautiful wisdom and the skillful action? Yeah. And then you bring that in with all of the other aspects that we have talked about. And, people can do this for themselves
Mm.
again, simplistic way. You can get a piece of paper, can draw a circle, you can put heart and essence into the center of the circle, or something like a symbol,
Mm.
or a picture, whatever,
Mm.
doesn't matter, or a name. And then around the outside, but remembering that it's not about inside and outside, because we're actually multidimensional here
Yeah.
and can go through. But then you have will and your mental mind and your emotional self. You have your masculine, feminine, and you have your physical body. And
Mm.
then there can be this conversation, this dialogue, this interaction that goes on, and it could be specific to maybe a problem that you have to overcome, or something that you've just taken place and you just need to work through it, and you're feeling a bit, out of it, a bit discombobulated.
Yeah.
That's when you can sit with this. Or of course, if you are working with somebody who can take you through something like this, or you can just talk it. You could just go take yourself off for a walk somewhere and chat. So if I can share a really lovely experience I
Yes.
had a number of years ago, I was doing the couch to 5K run, and I have not been a runner particularly in my life, but I was inspired to do this one particular year. And so it's a very clever little program. Some people listening may have done it. So, you walk for 30 seconds and and then you run for, I can't remember how it starts, but you build it up, seconds to minutes, etc. So essentially by the end of the, however many weeks it was, you can run 5K. That's the plan. So starting to do this and thinking in my mind's eye that I'm going to be able to do this. And after not very many seconds of running on those first, few days, thinking, oh, this isn't quite so easy as I thought it might be. So, well, what will I do? Because I've committed to myself to do this, and I've told some people I'm going to do it. And actually, I think I even did a little bit of fundraising. So I called in my aspects of self. So it's like, okay, today we're going to have this little, whatever I called it in the moment, but we'll call it true self. But you guys are coming with me. We're going to do it together. So as I was running, jogging, then I called each of these aspects in, starting with the physical body, because that was being the most challenged in that moment. And so the image in my mind's eye that I ended up with was me, physical being that I am in this, in this that you can see right now, with these little versions of myself running alongside me. And so the physical body was getting a lot of support, the aspect of the physical body, a lot of support from the other aspects. Cheerleaders, come on, we can do this. And then the mind came in with oh, this is hard, then one of the other aspects, come on, think, let's run, let's look at that tree ahead, let's see if we can, challenging, let's see if we can get as far as that, all that kind of thing. So I must have looked quite amusing because I was smiling at the same time as with a sort of grimace, because it was not finding it so easy. But it essentially, it became an enjoyable activity. And so over the weeks, as I was building up my strength and my capacity and my stamina, I checked in, the team were with me. And on occasions, in my mind's eye, there were things happening, like somebody was running on ahead. Somebody was doing kind of somersaulty, kind of acrobatic flips. Never been able to do one of those physically in my life. But so the experience became, I changed it into something very different. I utilized my intelligence of physical body, mental mind, emotional self, will, heart and essence, and the masculine and feminine, and we did it together. And without that, I don't know, because I don't know what obviously would have happened had I not engaged the team. But in doing so, yeah.
And I think one of the things that I love about this, one, obviously it incorporates all of you, but I think so often when we think about doing the inner work, we forget about that physical body aspect because we're doing the inner work. And I know that the physical is such a, it's a huge part of us actually being here. And we do acknowledge it, but often in sessions it might get ignored a little bit because obviously we're working through the inner work. And it is so beautiful in this model that it is, it has a major seat at the table. And I mean, I know every session we're talking, for me, I'm talking about the physical body. Often then it's not that it gets pushed aside, but it's okay, so what's creating that dis-ease within the physical body? But I love that this one, it's just got that proper seat at the table.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes it might be um, in this moment, I sort of visualize there could be a talking stick or
Mm,
something similar, with this little round table or board table kind of, because it is like a meditation when we do
mm,
it in a sense. Um, and sometimes the physical body might really need to be holding that talking stick because there's pain or there's discomfort or
mm,
there's an illness of some description that has manifested in the body. Then sort of everybody's listening, but there still needs to not be separation between this thing's happening to my physical body, but everything else is over there. Like, yes, we can, somebody might say, um, how are you feeling? So they're sort of bringing the feelings in,
mm,
but it's not necessarily the emotional self that they're asking, if that makes sense. They're
mm.
still wanting the body to give an answer of how you feel. Oh yes, well, the pain's not so bad today, type of thing. Whereas
Yeah.
actually tapping into this deep, these real, the deeper aspects, I guess, and having that
Mm.
understanding. So then when you're going through wanting to bring in some respite, some healing, then you are working with the whole team.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is just, yeah, it's beautiful when you start to get some of those images and how they're working together and where it's out of balance or who's not doing their job or
Yes,
who's doing
yes,
too much. It,
yes.
it really is like that in a household of,
It is.
who's carrying the lion's share and who needs to get delegated to because they're not.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. And the idea with the switchboard is that all, the lights are all, that all the switches work, the lights are on, the connections that can be made,
yeah.
and that there isn't a sense of a red light anywhere suggesting that
Mm,
they're out or off, or there's no sort of radio interference almost. I mean, I'm thinking it's very interesting, really, because this vision that I have is very much of the old-fashioned switchboard, but
yes.
it just seems to be, it just seems to make it nice and visual for
Mm,
people. Um, and I'm remembering as well in terms of when I've been over the years of learning this with my lovely mentor, that sometimes I'd be in a little bit of a stuck place and trying to tap into which aspect it might be or something like that, and she might say to me, well, what would your big toe think about that? And how does it feel, if you were to touch your left cheek, how does that feel? And it suddenly would shake you back into, I suppose, into your body and give you the ability to connect. So again,
mm,
there you go, switchboard. It was like, oh, the connection was just off slightly.
mm.
So you just focus on something more physical, actually is what you need to do to bring you back.
Yeah, I often think of it like the wiring in a house. And if, we know if the wiring's not good, something's going to go haywire.
Yes, absolutely right.
Or the
Yeah,
globe flickering and yet when it's all
yeah.
working together,
Mm.
we don't have any of those massive issues and problems. And when we do, we can weather them together.
Yes. Well, and literally then you're less likely to blow a fuse.
Yes.
Like, and the blowing a fuse doesn't necessarily mean in terms of an emotional
Mm,
outburst, but just something is just switched off. So yeah,
mm,
everything. And so tending to the electrics in our household
mm,
is important, and tending to the inner workings
mm,
of ourselves in this true self sense is vital as well.
mm. Now,
And
often,
yeah.
yeah, not often in healing, we talk about, I guess, the soul and spirit. Would you consider that the essence Or
I
is
s-
that
I
separate again?
well, this is an interesting thing. I think of the essence as being the essence of me. There's
Mm,
nobody else in the history of the world, that's come in at this time on this day with those parents and this sibling or whatever it
mm,
might be. But the essence is the what connects me to the universe.
mm. Yeah.
The soul, because I feel like the soul, because the essence, when I stop breathing and my heart stops and I go back to
Mm,
the earth in the way we sometimes see that, my essence goes with me,
mm. Yeah.
or doesn't exist. And I
Mm,
believe my feeling about our souls um is that they can live on,
mm,
like, because there's something about the soul of a person can leave an imprint
mm.
on another person.
Yeah.
Our I don't know if this is explaining it terribly well, but the soul
No,
just
it
feels
is.
bigger and, yeah,
Mm,
more permanent in
yeah.
a funny way.
Mm.
What would you say? How would you define
No, I think you've put
soul?
it beautifully. That essence of who you are and who you were, I think goes with the physical body, but that
Mm,
soul continues on.
mm.
The soul is undestroyable in my
Yes,
mind.
yes,
But I like
and
that the essence connects us into the soul. So I almost see it
yes,
like a little bauble hanging on the Christmas tree, just because we're probably coming up to that kind of
yeah,
time where there's that,
yeah,
the essence is, connecting us to that string, which connects us to greater. And then we're more looking at how we are in this world, how we are, because the soul is untaintable. It is the gold. It is the,
yeah,
perfection. And realistically, we're here having a human experience. And so I like that idea that the essence is the bit that connects us to that, which then we can draw through and bring out in the world. So, but
yes.
because obviously we so often talk about that mind, body, spirit connection, I wanted to see how you see that fitting in, and I like that little visual of the.
Yeah, yes, because the other thing about soul is, and again,
Mm,
very varying beliefs around this, but if we have been here before, or if we might come again, and
mm,
we sometimes will meet a child, for instance, and we'll say, oh, he or she's an old soul.
mm,
And there are things that we can't explain
mm,
in this world, because they can't scientifically find a reason why somebody might go into an let's say an old castle, just for
mm.
argument's sake, and know their way around.
Yeah.
So whatever it is that a soul has or possesses or is capable of feels yes, more permanent than
Mm,
the essence, which belongs to my essence, belongs to me, my
mm,
spirit belongs to me. We talk about when people have go through something, for instance, such as into a dementia or Alzheimer's, for instance, or through a trauma that sort of almost strips them of their
mm,
sense of self, then might even use the word dispirited,
mm,
as though their spirit or their essence is gone,
mm.
been not necessarily taken, but gone, checked
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Um, but so it's like a fading,
Mm,
so the body is so the mind is beginning to fade or fail, the
mm,
spirit as well as the mind, body, yeah, all three
mm,
aspects, mind, body, and spirit. So it's that takes you more towards the crone
mm,
area in terms of the returning to the darkness and that kind of thing you
mm.
mentioned in the beginning. Yeah,
Yeah.
that feels that feels comfortable in terms of
Mm.
me.
No,
I
that's
appreciate
beautiful.
there might be some very different varying rather opinions and
Mm.
beliefs and feelings, and that's okay.
But I think that's the beauty of it, because let's face it, none of us knows
No.
for sure.
Mm-mm.
And so it's playing with things that you hear and trying them on to see how they fit.
Yes. Yes.
And, so for me, if I think about organized religion, it's like me putting on my t-shirt from when I was 3 years old. It doesn't quite fit me and it's cutting off
Yes.
circulation. I can't quite be
Yes.
fully who I am. And yet, if I try on my version of spirituality now, which does include, God, Jesus, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, a lot of these characters, albeit archetypal, it fits more comfortably. It feels
Yes.
like it's actually made for me now. And
Yes.
so I
Yeah.
think with anything that we hear, it's let me try that on, let me work with it for a bit, let me feel into this, let me think around it, let me see how it resonates or doesn't, and then take the parts that do and leave the rest.
Yes.
Because I
Yeah.
think that's the way that we build our idea of how we want to operate in the world, and, whether there's consequences for actions or not, or how
Hmm.
we believe that the energy cycles work. And I think it really helps us to be able to go, well, this works for me and this doesn't. And one of the things I love about our sessions often is that you question things as much as I do. No, I think that one fits for me for right
Mm.
now. And
Hmm.
and
Yes.
that's a beautiful part, because I think we're always growing and learning and evolving if we choose to.
Yes.
And if we
Yes.
choose to be open and see what fits. And I remember
Mm.
being in sessions with you and I'm like, I don't think that bit fits anymore. And so
Mm.
it's like, okay, well, we'll take this off. What does fit now? And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
practicing with that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, a little bit thinking more about the soul or the soul's part,
Mm,
then we do talk about our soul's mission or purpose and that again feels like it feels different
mm,
to what I'm here actually with it, the essence within me, because it's the essence or the spirit of me and you that we're putting into our soul's purpose, for instance.
mm,
So there again, it's the macro and the micro, perhaps.
mm,
It's, one within the other. Um, and yes, things do change and we do grow out of things and we do have, I feel as though we interpret things differently. And
mm,
again, a lot of that depends on, well, how's the how is my little inner troop looking,
mm.
because if there is a little bit of disharmony somewhere within, then I'm going to interpret something differently.
Yeah.
So then what we have the ability to be able to do in using something, a modality like this, is to be able to keep on, keep check, and
Mm,
just, I've worked with this for such a long time that it's like there's something that's, not that I can't put my finger on it, and might not always be this that shows me the way. It might be something else. I might come and choose an oil, or sit down with and listen to a meditation or something. But when it's this, it's just that real instant of okay, who's not at the circle, like I can do.
mm,
Who do I know? Oh, okay, would you like to
mm,
come and, or should we send a little envoy over to have a little chat? And it's just lovely. It's just such
mm,
a very beautiful way of seeing what the inner picture looks like,
mm,
and being able to, yeah, utilize everything that we have been gifted, everything
mm,
we've come in with, to remember and bring ourselves back to that lovely unity. And
mm,
so as within, so without,
mm,
as above, so below. And
mm.
that's just a nice way of sort of rounding
Yeah.
things off.
There's
Yeah,
that beautiful gentleness to it. And I think
there
that's the
is.
word that always comes up with this, because there's not the accusations flying. It's this, we're welcoming you to the party. We really want to hear you. We want to see you. We want to feel you. We want you to be part of this. It's
Yes,
that inclusivity and the wholeness. And for me, that just brings so much gentleness
it does.
into the
Yes,
process. It's not that
yes.
hard. we've got to walk through it, we've got to feel it to heal it type, put your battle dress on, we've got to get through this. It's this much more gentle, approachable
Yes,
way.
yes. It's somebody saying, I'm here,
Mm.
I'm listening,
Yeah.
please talk,
Mm.
and so often we don't do that for ourselves,
Yeah.
and we make ourselves available to others, but we might have our own narrative going on, so we're not fully listening. So it's that, I think,
Mm.
the real ability to create some space to
Mm.
listen, and have that beautiful communication, open and honest.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so, so much for coming and
That
sharing
is
this.
my
It has
pleasure.
been an absolute joy as always.
That's lovely. It's such a lovely thing to do as well, to sit and have this conversation. As
Mm.
always lovely to connect with you on in any way, shape, or form. But this has really been very special. I'm very,
Yeah.
very appreciative and very grateful to you for
Oh,
inviting me.
thank you. I'm so grateful too, and I'm sure everyone listening will be as well.
I hope so.